Alright everyone, Buzzfeed isn't exactly legacy media, it's missing link media. It's like a Salon or some of these other groups that sort of get their start later. Like it's not as old as like the New York Times or something. And so they're not fully corporatized, but they are corporate entities, and they take their marching orders in part from political movements. It was so funny though. BuzzFeed's a deputy tech editor, link in the description, describing beaches as a bad thing because they're not productive and that enjoying them is late capitalism or something. I'm trying to think of myself, it's not even necessarily capitalism because it's not necessarily an economic component, number one. Some beaches, they're just open free to the public. There are beaches where you have to go in and pay, like the same thing with like lakes and things. And I've always thought that that was dumb. Like the idea that in order to go swim in a lake, that some people usually have lakeside property on anyway, to use like the maintained beach, you need to pay. It's just not have lifeguards there. Who cares? So somebody drowns, okay, you have a sign up saying, look, swim at your own risk. That's how most swimming spots are. I go swimming, sometimes in little ponds and things like that in Vermont. They're not marked. There's like a foot trail leading to them. It's sort of an unofficial swimmy place. There's no lifeguard there. And if I drown, I have swum at my own risk. That's just the way that the world works. You can't save every moron from themselves that decides to scarf down 5 hot dogs, goes swimming 2 minutes later, has a cramp and drowns. It's just, it's natural selection to some extent. But, first and foremost, many beaches are free. Number two, I'm not understanding, late capitalism first and foremost doesn't exist. That's a term that's used by leftists to describe corporatism. I'm not even seeing the connection here though. Again, it has nothing to do with corporations. It's a beach. It's a stretch of sand. And the idea that they're unproductive, my goodness, do you know nothing about ecology? Do you know absolutely nothing about biology? Don't even bother answering that question. I think that the question has basically already been answered. This is a necessary biome, part of ecology, and at first when I saw this, I assumed it was tongue-in-cheek. I assumed that it was like joking about far leftists, like that this is like what an AOC would say, like a brain-dead take. Then I realized, this is the tech editor at BuzzFeed. You look through and take a casual scroll through his Twitter. It appears that he actually believes what he's saying. Say, I guess the left has become so anti-science. The anti-vax movement's already far left anyway, skewed. Now you've got this as well. So now they don't even believe in maintaining beaches. Well, what are you going to replace it with, my dude? You remove the sand and make it just part of the water? Or are you going to put a wall up there and fill it in with dirt and grow grass or something? I don't really understand what you're talking about, and I don't understand why this would particularly be a problem that could be ameliorated. The only thing you can say about beaches is that in some cases they get eroded over time because they've been artificial from the get-go. That's another funny part. When people talk about, well, the beaches are eroding due to climate change, you do realize that some of those beaches have been artificially terraformed to begin with. If you've artificially terraformed it so that the sand is more level and stretches out further, it's going to tend to erode because that's not its natural characteristic. The water and air flows that are responsible for designing the coasts of the world will tend to maintain them in their natural state. And when man comes along and changes that, it tends to erode over time. That's a natural process. There's nothing that you can do about it. You can buff it up with rocks. Sometimes they maintain a beach, they put a line of rocks in, or a beach wall or something like that. That's fine. Of course, it tends to make the situation more and more artificial to the point where it's not really a beach at all. I always liked the beaches best that were the most wild. It's like when I go to New Hampshire, there are 2 beaches. There's Hampton and Northampton there. And those are the sort of the main ones. There's others like Rye and so forth all along the coast, but those are the nice ones. Hampton Beach, like the general one, the one with all the motels and shit along it, the bars and restaurants, that one's terraformed. And it's just a stretch of sand with, seashells after high tide occasionally and stuff. And it's kind of nice, like the sand is soft, and on a nice warm day, it's pretty, it's scenic. But I always like Northampton more. Northampton is not really terraformed, so there's like flotsam all over the place and piles of kelp and dead fish too. And there's all these tide pools, and they're full of like barnacles and mussels and stuff like that. And I always thought that was fascinating because you can see all sorts of weird shit in there. My mom found a dolphin skull, actually, at one point. At first, we didn't know what it was, but we found out we were turning it around. like you weren't looking at it from the right side. And so it almost looks like a demon skull from one side, actually. If you turn a dolphin skull around, look at the back, turned upside down, it looks like a demon skull with horns and everything. You wouldn't believe it. I imagine that probably spawned, when those wash up on the beach 500 years ago, I bet people went and they read their Bibles. But this dude doesn't know what he's talking about. Dude, beaches are great, especially rocky ones with tidal pools. I mean, I can understand if you're like him, if you're part of that trust fund class, which I'm going to presume probably is in effect here, your idea of a beach is designed by your observation of the terraformed beaches with all the motels along them that many people go to, where they're crowded, they're full of sunbathers, skinny dippers occasionally, and there's like bars and restaurants and stuff. And that's fun for a while, it's kind of touristy, but if you go off the beaten trail, and I know that liberals have a tendency to think that this is rustic and roughing it or something, but if you go to the beach that's next to it that fewer people go to with all the tidal pools and stuff, you'll understand the dynamics a little bit differently. And it's really, really fun too. You should get out into nature more. It's funny because with these protests, it's like some of these lefties here are saying, well, those protesters that want to go to the beach, they're all just a bunch of right-wing fanatics. So you're saying that right-wingers get more exercise, or are you saying that, they're the ones with jobs that actually want to go back to work? I think they would probably agree with the latter, maybe not as much with the former. I always thought that the left thought that people on the right just scarfed down burgers and Budweiser all day and sat on their couch. It's sort of the stereotype you hear from some of these people. I went to UVM, so I've heard it all, so to speak, and used to believe it. Back when I conflated that with religiosity, of course, it's sort of gone bye-bye in the Trump era. Now, I think this dude's a fool. He doesn't know anything about beaches at all. And again, I had to go through his Twitter to confirm that this was actually consistent with his apparent worldview, because at first I thought he was satirizing leftists. I thought maybe he's the one person at Buzzfeed who's like, he's more of a Clinton neoliberal, and he's satirizing the Bernie bros and some of the weird shit they say about late capitalism and stuff. This is really not as much of a serious video as a really, really funny one, because, I mean, again, chuckling at Buzzfeed is always relevant. But link in the description, you can check it out yourself, his weird post. Archived, of course. That's about all. Peace out.